The studio lights blazed. The air shimmered with tension even before the cameras went live. It was supposed to be a routine political panel, another primetime special where talking heads traded predictable jabs. But when Pam Bondi and Representative Jasmine Crockett were seated across from each other, everyone on set felt it. Something volatile was about to ignite. The network anchor's voice rang through the earpieces. 10 seconds to live! Bondi straightened her blazer, flashing the confident smile she'd perfected from years in front of the camera. Crockett, cool and composed, simply adjusted her microphone and nodded once. "Good evening," the host began. "Tonight, we're joined by former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to discuss recent political accountability hearings and what they mean for both parties." The first few minutes were professional, Bondi defending her party's integrity, Crockett responding with facts and steady tone. But when the conversation turned toward ethics investigations and political hypocrisy, Bondi's composure cracked. "You Democrats love pretending to be the moral authority," Bondi said, her smile tightening. "But you've turned investigations into witch hunts. It's political theater, and frankly, the country's tired of it." Crockett didn't blink. "Pam," she said evenly, "the country's tired of being lied to." The studio went still. Bondi leaned forward, voice rising. "Excuse me? That's rich, coming from someone who's built her career off political grandstanding." Crockett folded her hands, her tone never changing. "You're talking about grandstanding while defending people who've turned public office into personal gain. The difference between you and me, Pam, is that I still serve the people, not the powerful." A murmur rippled through the production crew. The host tried to pivot, but Bondi interrupted, her voice sharp. "You're out of your depth, Congresswoman. You don't know how the real legal system works." And that's when it happened. Crockett's expression hardened, the flash of fire behind calm eyes. "Pam," she said slowly, her voice dropping into a low, controlled tone that carried through the studio like a warning bell. "You've spent years using your position to protect corruption and call it justice. You've attacked people for power, not truth. But let me warn you, that kind of hypocrisy always catches up." The words hung in the air. Bondi blinked, taken aback. "Is that supposed to be a threat?" Crockett shook her head. "No, it's a forecast." Silence. Even the control room went quiet. The cameras zoomed in, Bondi frozen, Crockett steady. The host hesitated, eyes darting between them. "Congresswoman, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting," Crockett interrupted softly, "that when the light hits the truth, everyone who's built their career in the dark should get ready. Because exposure isn't coming. It's here." Bondi's face paled. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice faltered. And at that moment, every viewer watching at home could feel it. The shift, the reversal, the unmistakable sense that the balance of control had changed hands on live television. Crockett hadn't just answered Bondi. She'd dismantled her, quietly. Completely. The host cleared his throat, trying to move on. "We'll be right back after the break," he said. But everyone knew the break wouldn't cool what had just happened, because Pam Bondi had come to debate, and Jasmine Crockett had come to deliver a reckoning. The commercial break felt like an eternity. Producers whispered frantically through their headsets, trying to decide whether to cut the replay or lean into the drama that had just unfolded live. Pam Bondi sat stiffly in her chair, eyes darting toward the cameras that still glowed red even during the break. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, sat back, composed, hands folded, her gaze distant but deliberate. The moment the broadcast returned, the energy in the room had changed. The audience watching from home could sense it too. The air crackled with the unspoken aftermath of Crockett's chilling warning. Pam Bondi tried to regain control. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, her voice slightly trembling but still cloaked in authority. "I think your comment was inappropriate. You seem to forget who you're speaking to." Crockett smiled faintly. "I haven't forgotten, Pam. I'm speaking to someone who's been on the wrong side of truth too many times to count." Bondi opened her mouth, but no words came out. The pause stretched long enough to be uncomfortable. Viewers online began flooding social media with clips of Crockett's words. Within minutes, hashtags like #Crockett warning and Your Bondi meltdown started trending. The host, trying to steer the conversation back to policy, fumbled with his cue cards. Let's refocus on the upcoming hearings and what the American people can expect." But the audience wasn't listening to policy anymore. They were watching body language. Bondi's confidence had fractured. Her hands fidgeted with her pen. Crockett, meanwhile, radiated calm. her silence cutting sharper than any argument. One of the panelists, a veteran journalist, finally spoke. "What Congresswoman Crockett is saying," he said carefully, "is that political integrity isn't about defending your allies. It's about standing up for principle, even when it's inconvenient." Bondi shot him a glare. "So you're taking sides now?" "No," the journalist replied softly. "Just calling out the moment when truth walked into the room." The comment landed like thunder. Pam Bondi's expression hardened. She leaned into the mic, forcing a smile. "Well, maybe some of us have done more than just talk about integrity. Maybe we've actually practiced law." Crockett turned to her, voice calm, measured, but undeniably powerful. "And yet somehow, Pam, justice never seems to show up when you do." The studio fell silent again. The host lowered his head. There was nothing left to say. By the time the segment ended, Bondi looked shaken, her earlier fire replaced by something else. Uncertainty. Crockett hadn't shouted. She hadn't insulted. She had simply spoken the kind of truth that echoed long after the broadcast cut to black. And across the nation, people didn't remember the policies debated that night. They remembered one sentence, that chilling, quiet forecast from Jasmine Crockett that silenced a former attorney general on live television. Within hours, the clip from that night's broadcast had spread across every major platform. It started with a few political pages posting the 30-second exchange between Pam Bondi and Jasmine Crockett, but by morning, it had become impossible to avoid. The confrontation wasn't just viral, it was cultural currency. On TikTok, creators remixed Crockett's "It's not a threat, it's a forecast" line into sound bites layered over thunderclaps and dramatic zooms. On X, journalists and commentators debated whether Bondi's silence marked the end of her credibility. Reddit threads broke down every facial expression, every micro-gesture. One post titled "The exact moment Pam realized she was outmatched" racked up millions of views overnight. Users replayed the frame where Bondi's confidence visibly faltered. Others compared Crockett's calm demeanor to a modern-day cross-examination in real time. Cable networks couldn't resist either. By midday, every political talk show had replayed the exchange, analyzing it from every angle. CNN called it a stunning example of controlled composure. Fox News tried to downplay the confrontation but couldn't. Ignore the numbers. Their own viewers were. Discussing it nonstop, even late-night hosts jumped in. One joked, Pam Bondi brought talking points, Jasmine Crockett brought receipts, and a forecast. Laughter erupted, but beneath the humor, audiences recognized something deeper. Crockett hadn't just won a debate, she had exposed a power shift, a changing tone in American politics. Bondi's team scrambled for damage control. Her spokesperson issued a statement the next morning. Ms. Bondi stands by her comments and refuses to be intimidated by political theatrics. But it was too late. Screenshots of the broadcast, captions bolded with Crockett's warning, flooded every feed. The clip wasn't just political drama, it had become a symbol. Viewers, especially younger audiences, began framing Crockett's poise as the new model of resistance. Intelligence over aggression, truth over bluster. Political analysts started calling it the Crockett effect, the idea that authenticity, not volume, wins the modern media war. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi's silence grew heavier. Every time she tried to reclaim the narrative, the internet reminded her of that one moment, her stunned expression when Crockett delivered the line that now lived rent-free in America's political memory. A single exchange, less than 2 minutes long, had reshaped reputations, rewritten commentary, and redefined what political dominance looked like in the digital age. And for Pam Bondi, no spin doctor in the world could reverse the damage of being publicly outclassed by Jasmine Crockett. Not through shouting, but through silence that echoed louder than outrage. While the nation replayed the confrontation on loop, few people knew what had unfolded behind the cameras in those tense minutes after the broadcast. The studio lights dimmed, the red recording signs went dark, and the entire room exhaled. But the silence didn't fade. Pam Bondi stood abruptly, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled off her microphone. "That was ambush television," she snapped at the producer. "You let her attack me unchecked." The producer, caught between professionalism and panic, kept his tone even. "Pam, it was live television. We can't edit what happens in real time." Bondi's voice rose. "You should have cut to commercials sooner." Across the room, Jasmine Crockett quietly set down her earpiece. She didn't look angry. If anything, she looked thoughtful, calm, as though the storm around her didn't touch her at all. She spoke softly to one of the production assistants. "It's never about the argument. It's about what the audience feels when they see who's standing in truth. Her words carried more weight in that quiet studio than they had even on air. A makeup artist approached Bondi, offering to help before post-show interviews. Bondi waved her off. "Don't bother. I'm not giving any more statements tonight." She stormed toward the exit, her heels echoing against the tile. Cameras from freelance journalists waiting in the hallway caught her leaving. No smile, no comment, no confidence. Meanwhile, Crockett lingered near the monitors. The producer walked over hesitantly. "That line, the forecast one, it's everywhere already. Did you plan that?" Crockett shook her head. "No, I don't plan warnings. I just say them when it's time." In the control room, technicians replayed the moment again and again, analyzing the sound levels and reaction timing. Someone whispered, "You could feel the whole country stop breathing right there." By midnight, Crockett's team received calls from major outlets requesting follow-up interviews. She declined them all. Her staffer asked why. "Because if you explain power," Crockett replied, "you give it away. Let them replay it until they understand it." Hours later, the headlines shifted tone, from political gossip to something almost reverent. Journalists wrote about the psychological mastery of her delivery, the discipline behind her restraint, the fearlessness in her eyes when she said what no one else dared to say to Pam Bondi on live television. That night, even inside Bondi's own party circles, the whispers began. "She looked unprepared," one insider said. Crockett didn't just beat her, she rewrote the rules. By dawn, it was clear. What had started as a verbal clash had become a turning point. The cameras may have stopped rolling, but a new narrative had begun. One where composure became the weapon, and truth became the most devastating form of retaliation. The political fallout hit Washington like a thunderclap. By sunrise, Bondi's allies were already on group calls, trading anxious updates about the online reaction. "We need to push back, hard," one strategist urged, but no one seemed to know how. The clip was everywhere, replayed with captions, commentary, and side-by-side analysis. Every attempt at spin only amplified it. By noon, Bondi's public relations team had drafted 3 different statements, none of which she approved. One sounded defensive, another dismissive, and the third tried to pivot toward respectful dialogue. But the problem wasn't messaging. It was image. Pam Bondi's aura of control, built over years of sharp television appearances, had been shattered in one exchange. Her closest allies tried to rally behind her. A senator went on cable news insisting Pam Bondi was ambushed by a hostile panel, but viewers weren't buying it. Comment sections filled with replies like, "No one ambushed her, she just finally got held accountable." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's office was inundated with calls and messages, not just from supporters, but from politicians who had once underestimated her. A Democratic strategist summed it up best. "That wasn't a debate. That was a masterclass in power without shouting." Inside Capitol Hill, the mood was electric. Staffers replayed the confrontation in break rooms. Young interns quoted her lines like slogans. Even a few Republican aides quietly admitted that Bondi had looked rattled. For Crockett, though, the attention wasn't about victory. When reporters asked if she planned to capitalize on the moment, she simply said, "It's not about moments. It's about what truth makes possible afterward." But behind the scenes, political gears were turning. Progressive PACs began fundraising around the clip, using it as proof that composure and conviction could still command attention in a noisy political world. Major outlets requested exclusive interviews, yet Crockett kept declining, forcing the media to talk about her restraint as much as her words. Bondi's camp, meanwhile, faced open fractures. A few of her former legal peers privately criticized her performance. She underestimated Crockett, one said. She thought it was about rhetoric. It wasn't. It was about reality. By midweek, op-eds flooded national papers. The night confidence met competence. How Jasmine Crockett redefined political power, and the blunt headline that haunted Bondi's team the most. Pam Bondi lost more than a debate. She lost the room. In every sense, the exchange had become more than a viral clash. It was now a political pivot point. The kind of moment history books footnote as the instant when power's performance gave way to its substance. And though Pam Bondi still had allies, even they knew, no memo, no spin, no statement could undo what millions had already seen. One woman's chilling warning turning into another's public unraveling. By the end of the week, something in Pam Bondi had changed. Not visibly at first, but in subtle, telltale ways. She still appeared on television, still wore the same confident smile, still spoke with the same polished cadence. But behind the veneer, the certainty that once anchored her was gone. In the days following the panel, Bondi's inner circle noticed the difference. Meetings that once pulsed with energy now began with silence. Her notes, once neatly color-coded, were cluttered with second guesses and crossed-out lines. "She's overthinking everything," one aide whispered. She used to own the room. Now she looks like she's waiting for it to turn on her. The viral exchange had done more than damage her reputation. It had fractured her self-image. For years, Bondi had thrived on control. Every gesture, every phrase, every smirk was calculated dominance. But in that single moment when Jasmine Crockett's calm dismantled her bravado, something fundamental broke. Psychologists later called it the confidence collapse. When a public figure, confronted with unflinching truth, suddenly realizes that their power isn't rooted in respect, but fear. And once that fear evaporates, so does their command. Bondi's next public appearance was on a conservative news segment. She tried to sound defiant, declaring that she wouldn't be intimidated by political showmanship. But her voice faltered on the word intimidated. The host's eyes flickered, he noticed. Everyone did. Meanwhile, Crockett hadn't said a word since the broadcast. No interviews, no press releases. Just silence, and somehow that silence was deafening. It allowed the moment to breathe, to evolve into something mythic. Every time Bondi tried to explain herself, the internet resurrected Crockett's calm stare, her warning echoing in captions and remixes. It's not a threat. It's a forecast. Behind closed doors, Bondi's advisors urged her to move on. New story, new narrative, they said. But she couldn't. The memory of that night followed her like a shadow. The lights, the silence, the loss of control. For someone who built her identity around commanding every conversation, realizing she no longer controlled her own was devastating. And in that slow unraveling, America witnessed a rare thing, the public unmasking of ego. The exact moment when dominance gives way to doubt, and power becomes just another mask that slipped out of place. While the media storm swirled around her, Jasmine Crockett seemed to exist in a completely different rhythm, unbothered, focused, and startlingly calm. Her staff expected her to respond to the viral clip, maybe issue a follow-up statement, or capitalize on the newfound attention. Instead, she did nothing. When her communications director asked if she wanted to shape the narrative, Crockett smiled faintly. "The truth doesn't need management," she said. "It just needs room to breathe," and that's exactly what she gave it: space. While networks dissected every frame of the confrontation, Crockett went back to work. She attended committee hearings, spoke at community events, and continued pushing legislation she'd been crafting for months. When journalists shouted questions at her in hallways, she waved politely but didn't stop walking. The silence wasn't avoidance. It was control. In political culture, built on constant noise, rebuttals, and reactive outrage, Crockett's refusal to engage became its own form of power. Every day she stayed quiet, the viral moment grew larger, more mythic. Analysts began describing her restraint as strategic brilliance. Others called it a political reset, the rebirth of composure as dominance. Meanwhile, her popularity surged. A poll conducted a week after the exchange showed a sharp rise in public favorability, especially among younger voters who admired her unshakable calm. One commentator put it bluntly, "She didn't win the argument. She changed what winning looks like." Behind closed doors, Crockett remained humble. "Pam's not my enemy," she told her team one evening. "She's just a mirror. Every time someone in power mocks integrity, they show people why integrity matters." Her team was silent for a long moment after that. It became clear that Crockett hadn't simply outperformed Pam Bondi. She had redefined the playbook. Her chilling warning wasn't just a line that silenced a former attorney general. It became a symbol of a larger truth, that in an era addicted to outrage, stillness could be more disruptive than shouting ever could. Even major networks, hungry for conflict, found themselves captivated by her quiet defiance. One political analyst summed it up during a Sunday segment. Jasmine Crockett didn't just deliver a warning, she delivered a masterclass in controlled authority. In politics, the loud survive for a moment. The calm endure forever. And somewhere in that stillness, amid the echo of applause and the whisper of shock, Jasmine Crockett understood what few politicians ever do. that the most powerful response is sometimes no response at all. By the second week after the broadcast, the strain on Pam Bondi was impossible to hide. On camera, she still wore her trademark smile, still projected the same sharp confidence. But off camera, behind the flawless hair and the tailored jackets, something inside her had begun to unravel. Every time she stepped into a studio, she felt the weight of that moment pressing on her. The whispering producers, the sidelong glances from fellow commentators, the faint hesitation before the cameras went live. It all reminded her that she was no longer in control of her image. She was being watched not for her insight, but for her reaction. Her team noticed it first. "Pam, you're hesitating again," one of her media consultants whispered as she reviewed her segment notes. "You used to hit your marks like clockwork." Bondi forced a smile. "I'm fine," she lied. But she wasn't fine. In the privacy of her office, she rewatched the infamous clip for the fifth, maybe sixth time, the moment Jasmine Crockett looked her in the eye and said those words. "It's not a threat. It's a forecast." She tried to tell herself it had been unfair, rehearsed, manipulative. But no matter how many times she watched, she couldn't escape the truth that it hadn't been a setup. Crockett hadn't needed theatrics, just conviction. That was what haunted Bondi the most. The realization that what she'd mistaken for performance had been authenticity all along. Her phone buzzed with messages from allies. "Ignore the noise. Don't let this define you. They'll move on soon." But deep down, she knew. This wasn't fading. It had already branded her. At a fundraising gala that weekend, she tried to regain her composure. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, and she slipped into her practiced rhythm. But when one journalist casually asked, "Do you have any response to Congresswoman Crockett's warning now that it's been 2 weeks?" the room seemed to stop. Bondi froze for a heartbeat too long. "Warnings don't scare me," she said, smiling tightly, "especially from people who mistake dramatics for leadership." The quote hit headlines instantly. It should have sounded strong, but it didn't. Commentators called it defensive. Others called it deflection. The internet called it denial. That night, alone in her hotel suite overlooking D.C., Bondi turned off her phone and stared at the city lights. For the first time, the silence felt suffocating. She poured a drink, sat by the window, and whispered to herself, how did it all flip so fast? It wasn't that Crockett had destroyed her career. It was that she had destroyed Bondi's illusion of invincibility. The next morning, her assistant found her pacing the hotel suite, muttering about optics and narratives. "Pam," the assistant said softly, "you don't need to respond to her." "Maybe let it go," Bondi snapped. "Let it go? You think I can just let go of the fact that everyone thinks she shut me down? That I looked weak?" The assistant said nothing. Pam turned away, voice trembling. "I've worked my entire life to never look weak." The truth was that her downfall wasn't public. It was internal. Crockett hadn't humiliated her. She'd forced her to confront the fear she'd built her whole persona to hide, that her power depended on perception, not substance. And now, with that perception shattered, Bondi was left face to face with reality, one she could neither spin nor silence. She sat down slowly, the exhaustion finally overtaking her. "It's funny," she whispered. "All these years I thought I was the one issuing warnings." Outside, the city buzzed on, unaware. But inside that quiet hotel room, the battle that had started on national television ended not with another outburst, but with the quiet breaking of a woman who had finally realized that image without integrity always cracks under truth. Because Jasmine Crockett hadn't just delivered a warning to Pam Bondi. She'd handed her a mirror, and Bondi, for the first time in her career, had no defense left when she looked into it. The clip that had started as a spark had by now become a touchstone. Political analysts were still debating its meaning weeks later. Students in communication classes were studying it frame by frame, and every headline that mentioned either woman carried the shadow of that exchange. But away from the noise, two stories were unfolding quietly, one of loss and one of clarity. Pam Bondi retreated from the spotlight. She still gave speeches, still appeared at private events, but the public gleam was gone. Each appearance felt rehearsed, every smile more practiced than the last. She no longer commanded the air when she walked into a room. She merely occupied it. When asked about Jasmine Crockett, she deflected, saying, "We disagreed on live TV. That's all." But even her allies could tell that the confidence that had once been her armor was now just fabric draped over self-doubt. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett moved in the opposite direction, not chasing the fame, but deepening her purpose. Her warning had resonated because it wasn't performance. It was principle. In speeches that followed, she never mentioned Bondi by name, but her tone was unmistakable, deliberate, grounded, unflinching. At one university event, she spoke to a packed auditorium. Integrity isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're being watched by those who hope you'll flinch. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. The audience rose in applause. Students tweeted the quote. Journalists covered it the next day. And once again, Crockett's calm voice reached people far beyond politics. In Washington, her peers began to notice something else, a shift in behavior. More politicians were pausing before speaking, checking facts before firing insults. Quiet confidence had started to feel powerful again. Behind closed doors, an anchor who'd hosted that infamous night reflected to his producer, "I think that was more than a TV moment. It was a turning point. For all of us." The producer nodded. Yeah, she didn't just win an argument. She changed the temperature of the room. For viewers, the lesson was simple but unforgettable. That strength isn't the volume of your voice. It's the steadiness of your truth. Pam Bondi had spent years mastering the art of dominance, but Jasmine Crockett had mastered the art of presence. The world doesn't often stop for words anymore. But it had stopped for hers. As the final chapter of the viral saga faded into history, people remembered not the clash, not the ratings, not even the outrage, but that quiet moment when a woman looked her rival in the eye and reminded an entire country that power without honesty is just noise waiting to collapse. And that's the story. Everyone still replays, not because it humiliated someone, but because it revealed something. Pam Bondi tried to hold her ground with volume. Jasmine Crockett held hers with truth, and in that balance, America was reminded of a lesson older than politics itself. Sometimes the most chilling warning is the one that sounds calm, because it's already come true. Truth doesn't shout, it endures.